Welcome to the 3CL Conversation Series. I'm your host, Patricia Malia. A recent Time magazine article stated, colleges need to rebuild their academic portfolios around the demands of today's jobs market, the flexibility modern students want, and the employment outcomes graduates are achieving. Today, we are considering the possibility of a multidisciplinary approach within third-level education frameworks in the face of rapid technological advancement and a new kind of learner in a very uncertain labour market. This raises questions about what is a degree worth when AI seems poised to replace many human tasks. Should learning shift towards areas that are harder to automate, such as the humanities, the arts and social sciences, which encourage critical thinking, curiosity and creativity? Or, possibly, should universities consider combining more science and statistic-based subjects with the arts and social sciences to provide a broader scope of understanding? Or could offering the ability to create your own degree with subjects that interest you, similar to the liberal arts or humanities degrees already available here at the University of Malta, better align with a new style of learning? To help me unpack these questions, I have three fantastic guests. Firstly, our very own 3CL's founding director, Professor Alex Grech of the Faculty of Media, Knowledge and Sciences here at the University of Malta. Next up, we have Associate Professor of Sociology, Valerie Vicinich from the Faculty of Arts here at University of Malta. And finally, but certainly by no means least, Brian Azzopardi, CTO and Head of AI at SoftSwiss, who is also a student at the University of Malta studying politics with philosophy and sociology. Am I correct? That's what you're studying, Brian?
That is correct. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you for having us on.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. We have a lot to get through and cover, so let's all dive in. So I'm going to start with kind of the changing purpose of higher education that we're all finding ourselves in. And according to an article I read recently in Forbes.com, China has actually slashed some 12,000 degree courses, mainly in the social sciences and humanities, which it deems obsolete, prioritising AI, robotics and data science, which it feels better aligns with its national industrial goals, despite the fact that globally technological companies are letting go of thousands of staff. In addition, we have this kind of ongoing narrative of how kind of AI will eliminate all kind of lower level, entry level jobs and positions. And then on the other side of it, simultaneously, we have the media who are talking about graduates not being able to get jobs. They're struggling. They're staying on to do master's degrees. And if that's not confusing enough, we then have people like Anthropic who are saying that they're hiring loads of philosophers and they're championing philosophy. So it kind of seems that it's a bit of a minefield for not only a student, but for universities of how they are going to structure their courses. And Brian, I'm going to come to you first because you're very familiar with the Chinese market, which I have mentioned. You're also in AI and tech, but most importantly for this conversation, you're a student of politics, sociology and philosophy. And I know you're very, very passionate about that. So are the Chinese onto something? Like, should we be dictating our courses to the labour market?
Okay, good question. So, no, I do not think we should cut the humanities degrees. I think we need them very much. But in the intro, you said something interesting. You associated curiosity and creativity with the humanities. Now, the topic we're discussing is AI, which is a profound feat of creative engineering. So curiosity and creativity is actually can be found in all domains. Mm-hmm. Darwin went on the beagle. It's curiosity. Einstein's leap with the theory of relativity was a leap in creativity. It was a creative leap to change the framing. So maths and sciences are incredibly creative, and I think we should sustain them along with the humanities. Going back to the Chinese example, that's a very interesting one because China has stopped publishing its youth employment statistics. I think around 1/3 of its youth are unemployed.
That's interesting.
So luckily in Malta we're in a different situation, mm-hmm. right? So the Chinese may be doing what they need to do to help their youth find jobs. Regarding whether you want to tailor your labor policy to your or university degrees to your labor market, well, education serves multiple goals, some of them competing, right? So the first one is making citizens of us, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So that they need to be formed as citizens. The second one is instilling cultural values. Mm-hmm. So these are intrinsic goals. They're worth doing for their own sake. but people need to find jobs.
No, they do need to find jobs, and we will come to the goals in a minute. But I'm going to just jump to you. I'll come back to you, Brian. I'm going to jump to you, Valerie, because I know obviously you're not going to want them to be wiping out. I mean, you're a sociology professor. But the thing is, if AI is accelerating and a university model centred kind of on efficiency and calculability, and if that's kind of the mindset, I'm kind of concerned with how does the arts and humanities challenge this to show that there is value in those subjects for prospective students. I know there is value in and creativity in AI and science and maths. I agree with that completely. But how does the arts show its value on humanities subjects?
Yes, thank you, Patricia. I think I would start with the word challenging. I wouldn't say challenges. I would say the co-production, rather, of both. So, very similar to what Brian is saying here, we should not look at the educational system as in a very instrumentalized way that we are just producing workers, but the educational system gives you more, especially higher education. And one of them is critical thinking. So in view of AI, I would say that the humanities are more valued than ever, because it is the vehicle that really opens up the doors for critical thinking, for especially in sociology, where you question everything that has been there, that is taken for granted. So I'm very, very interested and curious on the impacts of AI to the human condition. Yet at the same time, I realize more the value of having a sociological imagination, of really being aware, understanding what is happening, how this can impact and is impacting your life, not necessarily in a bad way. No. We're understanding as well the positive in that. But also being very reflexive of how this is changing the way we navigate our everyday lives.
Yeah. And Alex, I'm going to come to you because Malta is small, the University of Malta is small, and in some ways, being small, we need to figure out how to sustain ourselves as a nation economically, but also as the broad stroke of, as Brian said, the citizens we're sending out there. So, how do you feel about it?
I have very conflicted feelings about some of these issues, and I'll anchor a bit of some personal context. So again, I'm very encouraged to see Brian getting to university at a time when he's had a successful business career. So obviously there's a need for you to engage with the higher things, okay? Philosophy, thinking. And then there's the whole thing about critical thinking. And one of my gripes is where do you learn critical thinking from? And my philosophy at the moment is I think you learn critical thinking at home with your family. That's where you get your value system. And by the time you get to university, and those of us who have to teach people aged 19 to 70, in some cases the damage has already been done. In other words, I teach digital literacies, critical digital literacies at the University of Malta, and AI literacies these days, because that's the sexy thing. And it's extremely challenging. So I think one of the things we have to look at now is, and since we're talking about the labour market, is we have to go back to looking at the gaps between what we think, if there are gaps, between a university and the labour market, or should the university be there to source the labour market or not? Okay, and these are things which we struggle with. You started talking about China and China, going towards STEM subjects, and I thought it was very interesting that Brian said, well, yeah, because so many kids are unemployed. Remember, we live in a very strange world in Malta. It is one of the few places I know in Malta where I'm teaching a 19-year-old and they've got a job. And it's almost like they're doing me a favor because they're turning up for a lecture.
Exactly.
Okay, I should say thank you because they're there. Okay, so I'd rather have 5 Brians aged 40-something who want to learn something,
and a couple of Patricias, which you've had,
and a couple of Patricias who I've also taught, aged whatever it is, as opposed to somebody who's 25. There. But I think it's important. Somebody who's there for one thing, and this is the one thing we should zero in, called the credential. So people are here because of the credential. They get to wear a funny hat after 3 years. As part of the whole PISA regime here, okay? You've got 4 tries in terms of a study unit. If you fail, you fail, you fail. People are determined that at some stage, everybody's going to pass. And then you've got a credential, and suddenly you're a graduate. Now, are you ready for the labour market? I don't know. What does the labour market need? Don't really know. what should the labor market be doing about these things? And then fourthly, there's the big elephant in the room called AI. And I'm sure you're going to talk about this, but the whole thing about AI is we've gone from a university, and I get this is a progressive university, by the way. Okay, early on, it was decided that we should embrace AI here, or Gen AI, which I found very refreshing at the time. Having said that, I'm now reading a lot of stuff about people who had high office saying that we should go back to pen and paper and go back to the military style of lock people up in a prison and get them to have a credential. These are things which I find very difficult to engage with. And again, as somebody who came to university late, unlike some of these academics, I joined the university when I was in my 50s, and I did a PhD by accident or by design because I thought it was something missing in my life. Okay, so I haven't followed the usual pathway of getting to a university. So I always see the university as, I'm a bit of an organic intellectual here because I'm always on the inside out. Okay, and which is why we created the 3CL. More about that later.
Yeah, but that's interesting. You're talking about the various streams of study and what's on offer, and it does come back to that cultural thing. Because I mean, I'm Irish. I'm not Maltese. I'm looking at this from an outside view, but Malta has a very traditional mindset about what subjects their children should be studying. And, arts is not really the top of the list of many Maltese parents. It tends to be law, medicine. Traditionally in here, that's kind of how it has been. And then you had the government who offered more money in stipends for STEM subjects. So a student studying STEM will get €444.45 every 4 weeks. It's still very little. You still have to go and work. Tourism studies, which is connected to economic growth, is €251. And students doing the arts, including law, which I was very surprised, is €135. Now, you would imagine if they're offering more money, maybe more students would choose those subjects. Actually, they haven't. They actually haven't chosen those subjects. But it does highlight that there is a kind of a slight governmental push towards that and a kind of an encouragement towards those subjects over the arts subjects, including law. But everybody also tells us that AI could take over lawyers' jobs down the line as well. So there's a slight misalignment between the cultural nuances of the country, what the government wants to maybe possibly move students down a certain direction, and then what a university is able to actually do. In a Maltese context, I mean, not because it's a small country. So Valerie, how does this kind of growing misalignment then move beyond the traditional mindset, which automatically creates silos in academia and society, and then better prepare students for possibly a more interdisciplinary future?
I would like to be a bit optimistic and believe that students at the age of 18 maybe have a bit more agency on what to go for rather than what the parents say. But that's very debatable. And more than that they won't just choose a course because of the stipend, because I think that would be a very sorry situation if you go for a course which you're not passionate about, but the stipend is better. So that idea aside, there's also a push towards STEAM rather than just STEM. So the arts there somehow is being featured, which I think it's still in its infancy. But let's hope that this will take us to a direction where we realize more the importance of the arts. I think the AI will push forward this idea because it will be a reactionary process. The more automation we have, the more things that can be done with machines, the more we realize what we can do, which machines cannot, till now at least.
Of course.
So being optimistic about this, I think the arts can offer that gap, which till now is missing. Yet still I'm very much aware about the growing uncertainty there is now in terms of what AI is doing, what it will be doing in the future, how it will change. our lives and possibly our jobs. So I do acknowledge the sense of anxiety that is building, not just amongst younger people, even amongst everyone. So I just concluded a study with Culture Venture on the impact of AI on artists, the cultural practitioners. And the most interesting remark is this. First of all, there's very limited training. They feel they're not trained in this. There's a huge uncertainty in terms of what is ethical, what is controlled in a way, how are they safeguarded as artists, their work, their careers. So the most, I would say, if we had to summarize the conclusions, is this climate of uncertainty, which is we don't know where we are.
Yes, we're all kind of just
we don't know where
darkness.
this will head as well, how this will head. So, and I think we'll never have an answer there because, as you said, this is something that is continuously
It's evolving,
changing and
really, isn't
shifting.
it?
So we're continuously finding our feet when our ground is continuously shifting. So, but yes, I do acknowledge the challenges that we are experiencing, not just students, but also academics, for example, where students are taking the shortcut and producing their work through AI. So this brings about our shift in having more presentations, more discussions in class in order to really gauge their understanding and their knowledge on what we're talking about.
And we'll come back to kind of the format of the classroom in a little bit, but I'm going to just jump over to Alex, because Alex, you're at this kind of crossroads between education and digital transformation, and places like the Netherlands and Canada are very different to, say, the educational structure that we have here in Malta. And I'm just wondering, are we dividing disciplines and the silos too stringently? In your view, are we too rigid about the disciplines? Are we all sticking in our own areas?
How blunt do you want me to be?
Be as blunt as you want.
I'm a
Be
university
honest.
with institutionalized silos. I could easily be teaching in your faculty and you don't teach in my faculty. And yet I'm told I have to teach within where I am, and those are my teaching commitments. And anything beyond that is almost like, oh, really? So let's blow up the myth of the interdisciplinary education model at a university. I'm not even saying it's specific to this university, because this university is very symptomatic of a small state university that, not necessarily through its own strategy, was for many years driven by the value of numbers. The more people we get, the more successful we are. The more people we ensure that they do not end up going into jobs at the age of 16 and they go to university, the more successful we are. And I'm in a faculty which, in a way, reflects that.
So what would, sorry Alex,
Okay.
what would an interdisciplinary degree then look like?
An interdisciplinary degree would be that you would have occasionally somebody from philosophy would come and teach you something. Let's say we're talking about critical thinking. I saw you wince when I said, critical thinking, the first encounter with us at your family. It doesn't mean that your family teaches you critical thinking. It might also be that your reaction against your family gets you to start to question your own reality. But my idea of a semester is a plug and play thing where students can go and say, I want a piece of this, I want a piece of that, and at the end of it, I am going to get a BA in.
That's like
something.
humanities, though. That's
Exactly.
what I do, humanities.
I come, and again, I'm a strange egg here, okay? I'm somebody who used to be a chartered accountant for my sins. But when I got to do my PhD, I wanted to make sure that I didn't do anything which had to do with numbers. So I actually did very much a humanities, social science degree because I wanted the other side of my brain. Now, there are people like Brian, there are people like this guy out there, and we meet them.
Of course.
But they are sporadic. So even Trish, whom I taught, you're from the Faculty of Arts. It's almost by accident that you turned up at one of my courses.
And I had to get permission.
And you had to get permission. So the first thing you need to look at is how are study units structured? How long does it take to change a study unit? Especially at the time when AI is changing everything, okay? And we know it's about 18 months. Now, I decided at a crucial time in my life, around about 2016, but I happened to be in an interesting position in Vancouver, and I thought, I want to create something which university cannot do. In other words, I want to create something which is interdisciplinary, looking at applied research, and we can move quickly, react to things very quickly. I cannot wait for 18 months to change a study unit called X into study unit Y, because some committee that I don't know, who know nothing about me, will decide what I should be teaching. So look at the model at the moment. It's broken. And it's fundamentally broken. Now, I have great hopes at the moment, specifically at the University of Malta, seeing that the new rector has already made public announcements saying that he wants to have a university which is more relevant to society, that we may start to bridge some of these gaps. But at the moment, there is a chasm. And it's a huge chasm. Now, in Malta, it's a strange chasm. It's a strange context because we have kids who already have jobs at the age of 18, as opposed to somebody in Italy at the age of 18 working as a waiter. Okay, if lucky. So let's not mix up the strange context of Malta. I've always been much more interested in how we can use Malta, say, as a living lab, where you can try out crazy new things sometimes, and it could be education, or it could be science, it could be AI, but then look at how things that you've done here could be resonate with the bigger, wider world.
Okay.
My interest in just the small state is limited at this stage of my life.
Okay. But Brian, if we're looking at potentially, breaking down the silos, blowing up the system in some ways, and creating a new system, would that meet the industry needs? Would it put people out into society, the citizen, as you've mentioned, with the better balance and better qualifications? And I also want to point out that I had a very interesting conversation recently with somebody that pointed out to me the University of Malta in particular doesn't seem to have an idea of the kind of alumnus it is sending out into the world. And I thought that was an interesting statement. So somebody comes from Harvard or Cambridge, what they're about. And right now, it seems a little bit vague. Maybe it's just the world we're living in. But what kind of alumni are we sending out into the workforce to people like you to employ? And would an interdisciplinary approach give you a better employee at the end of the day?
That's a good question. There's a lot to unbundle there, what Alex was saying. Also, your reference, I'll make a quick side note about historical professions in Malta, medicine and law. Now, literally a few hundred meters away, there is a world-class institute called the Institute Maritime Law. So Malta has a historical competence, world-class competence in both medicine and law. We should lean into that.
It's true.
So to circle back to your AI discussion, we should apply, so those institutes and the institutes in general would probably be better well served if they can see how they can apply AI to maritime law or to medicine.
Oh, wow.
Think about, we have an aging population. So aging population, a declining workforce, why don't we apply AI to geriatric care? To
use it wisely, you mean?
To apply it. So there's AI on the frontier, creating AI, and there's applying it. And we have already world-class expertise in, say, maritime law and medicine, and we have a hospital like 400 meters away as well. So it's really close, not just physical, but we need to make the mental bridge, right? Mental bridge. Now, would an interdisciplinary degree be helpful? Alex, I may have to disagree here. The last thing we need is physics for poets, right? There's breadth, but if it's a mile wide and an inch deep, it's useless, right? We don't need to teach Foucault to electric engineers. For one thing, probably electrical engineers know more about power than Foucault ever did, and there's a pun there. Right?
You do love Foucault.
I love Foucault, dead. So breadth of knowledge is not the same as the ability to understand.
True.
It's not the ability to identify what matters. It's not complex problem solving. So what I'm looking for, what different disciplines bring is perspective, but it needs to be applied.
Okay.
So it's not very helpful knowing logic if you don't know how to apply it. So last week, Anthropic released a paper which bridges a new model they have with theory of consciousness, basically heavily implying that their latest models have consciousness or on the verge of consciousness. But I used concepts I know from philosophy, the concept of concept, to basically, I put a long post out on LinkedIn explaining why that is not in fact the case. So it helps to bring, I think deep domain knowledge is actually useful. I don't know if just plugging something like from one discipline, putting it into another is enough. I think what we need to look for is something generalizable. So, and I'll finish on this note. Sociology, there are some statistics units, but I don't think it's very, very popular, unfortunately. So maths generalizes. Math can be used in banking, finance, engineering, sociology, quantitatively. So maths, logics, causal inference, they're very, very helpful. From the humanities side, what can you apply to the sciences? History.
Yeah.
So epistemology, right? Justified true belief.
Yeah.
So I think the humanities have a great engagement with their history because that's what they are. Mm-hmm. They are rooted in the social world and the human world. So you have to engage with who came before you. I don't think engineers do enough of that. And the reason why is twofold. Empirical data is empirical. It is objective. But the practice of science, the practice of engineering is not objective. It is subjective. It is human created. So Kuhn's structure of scientific revolution, where you chart how science advances one debt at a time. When a senior engineer or a senior scientist who is a gatekeeper, Alex was mentioning this, big silos at university, that's effectively gatekeeping. Of course. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. So education, science, humanities advance, one gatekeeper dying at a time.
Yeah.
So making people aware of the historical contingency of their field, I think would help bring perspective.
It gives a more rounding approach, doesn't it, really? And the thing is, and this is well known in sociology students hate statistics. Not that we hate them, but you wouldn't find us jumping, I think, at it. It's generally a universal kind of opinion in the University of Malta, and various lecturers have said that. So, I think it would benefit, though, wouldn't it then, Valerie, that if you have sociology students and philosophy students or whoever, that they are doing some level of statistics and some kind of thing, whether it's compulsory or just like part of their courses, and vice versa, as you say, history, and that there is this kind of mishmash. And is that more that they're just given more optionals and more electives?
They do have possibilities to go into statistics and to study. Why? Because they need to understand the broader picture. So if you're profiling a society, you need to have the more generalizable data. Mm-hmm. Yet at the same time, then we tend to look at and favor the more fine detail of why things are happening, mm-hmm. what is going on. So, and then you get that through a more qualitative.
We love qualitative.
But we can't exclude quantitative in the whole picture. I think both are important to understand social phenomena or something that is going on. So we do urge students to have a good overall knowledge in both fields. But yes, I do agree with you. Most of our students tend then to focus on the dissertation on a more qualitative nature, which is understandable because it's something that they can relate to. They are in touch with
They're engaging.
It's engaging. It's an immersive experience with their participants. So, but as Brian was saying, humanities do give this opportunity for our students to do study units from various other.
I'm one of them.
Other departments, and the increasing number of more mature students in my classroom, I find it very, very welcoming for me, because students really come there not for a degree, but really as an enhancing experience, as a way how you broaden your understanding. And this idea of having this multidisciplinary approach, you can't understand society without understanding its history, without understanding its geography, without understanding popular culture and media studies. So I'm proud to say that our department, we have quite an array of study units that really go into different fields. We have visiting lecturers coming from different other departments, which give us their input on that. So I think that's a very good start.
No, it is a good start, but you've mentioned the level of mature students that you have in your classes, and I am one of those, and Brian is one of those. But
I'm not offended.
You're not offended. Sure, you're
Not
25,
offended, sure.
Brian. You're only
I'm sweet
25. You're only 25. We won't tell anyone the real age. But I'm thinking of kind of younger students coming through. Like we have picked our courses because we're generally interested and we bring something else to the table. But a UK report indicated that it's the worst time in 30 years to leave university, with many graduates are staying on to do a master's to become specialised. Now, I know from speaking with graduates here at the University of Malta that many of them are staying on to do a master's because there is no job. It's not about being specialised, it's because there is no job at the end of the day. And that is a very daunting thing as a 20-year-old, where the world is already complicated enough that you're going to have a degree, you don't know what job you're going to get with your degree, you don't know what use this degree is. So what really is the point of a tertiary education anymore? Is it just to be academics and sit around with pipes and talk about Foucault? Like, what's there for them? How do we address that, Valerie?
I would say that staying for a master's degree is a way to better equip yourself as a student.
In what way? Equip yourself?
The very fact that being young in your early 20s and having a master's degree can open more doors for possible jobs. Now, in humanities, our students go into completely different fields. So we have students going into teaching, we have students going into statistics, we have students going. So I meet past students everywhere.
Yeah.
So, and that is, I think, the beauty of the humanities, because we're not doing dentistry and you become a dentist. You can become whatever.
You're everywhere. You're everywhere.
So, and it's like, I always tell students, choose something you're passionate on. Study something you're passionate on. Mm-hmm. Then you'll find your way. You find your way somehow. And yes, we have to see the peculiarities of our location, the very fact that, as we've said, we're lucky to have jobs, that jobs are available. So students are reducing a bit that anxiety of not knowing whether I will be employed or not. Let's say that this anxiety is part of the youth question. So every generation, I was a 20-year-old, I still remember that sense of uncertainty and anxiety. What will I be doing with sociology? So this is something I think constant with every generation. Maybe a bit less now, because students are roaming into different areas and fields.
They're going all over the place.
Yes.
Okay.
Should students be held responsible for picking a degree which doesn't have a job at the end? Because that ties into the very first question.
Well, I'm going to
come. The government is blamed.
I'm going to come to that in a minute.
As always.
Because we need to change a battery. So, Alex, I'm going to jump to you on a kind of a reply, and then I'll come back to you, Brian, regarding what Valerie was saying about, the point and purpose of an education now in terms of tertiary education and what it has to offer. We've got AI on the other side, and it can do everything. So, what's your take on all of that?
Okay, so my first take is, do you need to go to university to learn anything?
Exactly.
Question one. Number two, my generation didn't go to university. We didn't have a university to go to. Mm-hmm. So I'm one of that generation that had to work by day and study by night and escape. It's very different to the situation these days. But do you need to go to a university to learn in the age of AI? And that begs another question. What are universities for? Are universities there for you to explore knowledge? Now, I'm not interested particularly in the university as an institution. I'm interested in learning. I'm interested in citizens who want to learn. I'm interested in lifelong learning. I'm interested in the fact that my 96-year-old father-in-law, 2 days before he died in England, he was living on his own, was still ordering his meals online. And even though his body was failing, he tried everything in his power, including the oxygen he was running with, to keep him mobile. So again, the point you're making about where can AI take us, and my father is 89, I would do anything for my father and his partner to have somebody every single time somebody falls, that there would be somebody that could actually physically pick them up. Mm-hmm. And also somebody who could talk to my dad, because sometimes it's very difficult to talk to my dad about Milan all the time, So we're in a very strange time at the moment where I think the big elephant in the room, and people here may be refusing to talk about, is what is the university for? Now, in a state university, it's there it has to be there, is the state university. It's also the monopoly university. And I'm not against universities. I come here, I teach, and I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to come and teach here. But what are we teaching? And is what we're teaching for the good of learners who, at the end of the day, and we all know the other elephant in the room is assessments. I mean, I think the former rector said, forget assignments now. I think I read, no? So, good morning. Okay? Can you still get your students to write an essay? I think you can. And I've tried it, knowing and telling my students, you can use AI, you can use Claude to help you think. But I'm going to get you to write about you, and you were one of my victims.
I was.
Okay.
I'm still alive.
So I use a philosophy book to get people to really dig deep about what they wanted to do. So, one, I'm certainly not a Luddite. I am using AI as my research assistant on speed. Am I increasingly dependent on AI? I am. But it's helping my thinking to get to a higher level. But if I want to go back to the problem is endemic and starts at the age of 3, 4, the way we teach kids over here. In Finland and in other places, you're taught immediately that what you get on a screen is not necessarily truthful. Here we do the complete opposite. Here, if you teach ethics, I think, in education, I think it's deemed to be an alternative. So for those kids whose parents don't want them to go into religious classes, remember a motto, you only learn one religion, you can go to an ethics class instead. Everything is inverted.
Which is basically religion, because my son did ethics. It's basically religion.
So there are many historic, hegemonic problems here, which will probably go beyond my lifetime to do. Now, when you get to my age, because you're surprised because I'm 65, and time is not on your side, but you're passionate about interdisciplinary education, okay? I had no choice 10, 11 years ago, before I got to university, and thinking I was bringing something valuable to universities, to create an alternative space where you can get computer scientists, sociologists, philosophers, activists in the same room to talk about, say, things like the post-truth society. And we were doing this in 2019, not now. But the whole idea was you could use Malta then to film it, like we're filming something here. And if it works here, it might resonate in the Netherlands, for instance. That's the approach I've taken. But the big elephant in the room remains this. What is the university there for? And all my colleagues, wherever they happen to be, everybody's discussing this. The problem with assessment. What are we assessing? Learning outcomes? Good luck. Knowledge? Good luck. Curiosity? Hopefully. Being able to, one of the things I'm setting up, and I think you know this, is I'm trying to encourage my students to ask a question. But it's almost impossible to go and get a 19-year-old to look at you in the eyes because they're programmed to look at a screen. So how can I get them to look up? Okay, so these problems are huge, sociological, anthropological, the way we're hardwired. And that is why I'm devoting my winter years to AI literacies, to starting to understand what is it, understanding. We're still at the stage of understanding what's going on if we want to apply it mindfully. And my feeling is a lot of universities are not that. They're stuck in the silos. They're stuck with the credentialing system that they have. You may speak about micro-credentials, for I know I have a lot to talk about.
Coming up.
Okay, yeah, so...
Can I jump in here, Alex? So
please.
I think there are 2 points there which are worth picking apart or worth discussing in separate. So people or young children are looking at their phones, and that's a problem with attention. I think you had a guest, Paul Redmond, here like some time ago. So I think that's an attention issue, and I have absolutely zero problem with banning social media or even screens for children up to the age of 16, say. So I have zero problem with it because I think we need to go back to long-form reading, thinking. And as to the value of university, I think I'm optimist. I wouldn't be here. You teach here. All right. I think there is a value in it on the character formation side. So university is also imparts knowledge, but what it should be doing as a side effect is a form of mental labor. And that is, you don't become a sculptor in one go. It takes practice. It takes time. So every assignment we're given is an opportunity to hone your skills, to be able to sit down, think through something, and deliver something at the end of it. And hopefully in the process of that, if you do it long enough and often enough, you're building a skill which is helpful for you in general and out in the wider world. So I think one of the things it should teach is this self-discipline.
Yeah, but that's all fair and good, Brian. But we're not dealing with a generation that are the same as you or I or Alex or whatever. And the way they learn and the way they comprehend things is very, very different. And one of the things in the Time magazine piece that I mentioned earlier, and it was a line that really struck me, and it said that colleges need to stop assuming that students will eventually discover the relevance of college on their own. Okay? Now, we're in a situation whereby we have students who get very little money in a stipend or grant. They're coming into university, they have to have full-time jobs to facilitate either funding their car, their motorbike, just a basic lifestyle.
But think of what privilege that is.
But
we don't even pay for our university education.
Yeah, but we don't pay for university. We don't pay for university in Ireland either. But you've still got accommodation costs. You've still got to feed yourself as a student. You're coming in trying to hold down a part-time job, go into a classroom that may not be stimulating either. And we can't keep blaming all the time the AI situation. There are many classes, and I've done 33 subjects in my humanities degree across 4 faculties in numerous departments. And the classroom has not changed in 150 years. And it cannot all be blamed on either AI or the students aren't interacting or whatever. The whole structure needs to change. And we're assuming that students are coming in here because they're interested in a subject. Most of them are coming in here because they're clocking time. They get in because they're Maltese. They don't even need points. In Ireland, you need points to get into university. They're trying to hold down a full-time job or part-time job and study. They're either tired when they come in or there's no interest in the class, because the lecturers aren't engaging. So the whole structure, sometimes it feels like we're trying to put a circle into a square. What I've seen, and I'm across faculties, and I spend a lot of time with the students. I spend more time with the 19, 20-year-olds than I do with the mature students. So we have very different kind of learners within one class. Like Valerie, you have mentioned, your older students are very engaging, the younger ones aren't. So even lecturers are trying to figure that out at the moment. It's very tricky, Alex.
Well, take it back. Why are we in a classroom?
Why are we in a classroom?
Why do I have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to be in a classroom with a bunch of people who are fast asleep? And I'm told that's the only slot for 93 people because that's where they can herd them in. So I'm looking at 93 people who are comatose. I'm comatose. And what can I do? I've put on Rage Against the Machine. I've done it at 8 o'clock in the morning.
The irony.
And some guys will test. And you try every trick in the book. The problem remains the attention economy, which means, yes, a lot of people now have been hardwired, driven by social media, which is not social. I'm somebody who was very optimistic about social media. Now I'm on the other side, of course, with my old internet hippie colleagues, that we think it's brutal as to what's happened. Why are we in the classroom? Why are they there at 8 o'clock in the morning? What is it that I can teach them? What should I be teaching them? Should I show them a bunch of slides that have been the same for the last 25 years? Or should I, deliver something via notebook LM or some video, something which can make something more engaging? We're not addressing the issue. And as long as the system remains siloed, departmental, with fiefdoms, it's not going to get any better. And in a case of Malta, where you do get your stipend, so you can drive your fancy car to get to university, okay, and complain because you don't have anywhere to park. Let's not consider Malta to be symptomatic of the whole world. This is a very strange place unless the bubble bursts. Us academics are dealing with strange bubbles, and we muddle along and make the most of it. There are some brilliant academics in this university, but the collaboration between them is weak because they remain stuck with having to do the set number of teaching hours, and if not, they'll be kicked out. In terms of the research, it's not really particularly respected, but the administration is. Okay? We are increasingly turning universities into administration silos, as opposed to learning places where you go and learn. And if that's the case, they deserve to become redundant.
Would micro-credentials kick that out of the water then?
No.
Here. Not here.
I can
Would
talk
it work
a lot
here?
about micro-credentials. I project managed the first blockchain system in Malta for the accreditation of learning here. Okay, not the way universities are doing it. Universities are doing it as top-ups in many cases.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, and I was on the Centre for Liberal Arts on class. The way we're seeing it in some universities, okay, is and it's not bad. You can have mature students, for example, who dropped out And we use the micro-credentials to kind of top things up. We're not using the micro-credentials for interdisciplinary stuff that I can go and sit on a sociology degree with you guys, which I would love to, or go and listen to Peter Mayo talk about Gramsci, for instance, which I was lucky enough to find out about when I was doing my PhD in Hull, and my supervisor said, "Oi, I think you're doing CDA, and go and speak to Peter." Who's Peter? Okay? We don't do that. That's not the way. The micro-credentials are essentially being deployed for either people to say, it's also, remember, we have the ECTS system here. Okay, so the idea of top-ups is more study units. The more you cram, the better. What a surprise that by the time kids at the end of year 3 are on medication because they're trying to get some dissertation at the end of the day and loads of study units. I think it needs a rethink. And it needs bravery to think this thing through. It takes bravery also when you don't have competition. And that's part of the problem that a lot of small nation states have. I was speaking to somebody in Iceland last week, and they have exactly the same kind of situation.
Really? So it's a small state kind of issue?
It's very much, if you're the only, okay, in Malta we're not the only university, but if you are the only university, and you have these fiefdoms, which have been institutionalized for hundreds of years. Okay, this is a very old university. So I don't blame anyone in particular. It takes a lot of bravery to go down the interdisciplinary way. Now, I happen to think that we've already had one crisis called COVID, when we could have done something about it. But in fact, after COVID, it was like, let's go back to the classroom as if something didn't happen. With AI, I think there's another opportunity. But we need to say how we're going to fix it, how to address it. And I don't have the ready solutions, by the way. Okay, I just know what I'm doing outside university at the moment.
Valerie, what do you think of that?
Yes, something I think with what Alex is saying, with the COVID, I was thinking about the pandemic and what it taught us. And something I think that taught us is that away from the bureaucratic and administrative issues of the university provides a community. And you go to university, not just to learn, but also as a part of your personal development as an 18, 19-year-old, to meet, to discuss, to have. So it's part of your youth. And I think that's a very crucial part, which we
But they're not doing it, Valerie. They're not. The kids are not having, the young people in this university are not having the university experience that you think they're having. They're coming in, they're doing a class, and they're going off to work. I know so many students
more an
doing
individualized experience, unfortunately.
We don't even have a bar in university. That we unheard of in Ireland. There's nowhere to socialise. We don't even have a bar.
I think the COVID pandemic taught us that you can do work at home.
Yes.
You can do it on your laptop anywhere. But the reason why you actually share an office, go to work, it's not just to do work only, but it's to share your life with other people. And it's what's having a coffee, discussing things. So I think we are missing out on this value, on this very important value, especially when you're younger, where you meet up. So the meeting place.
Yes.
And this, yes, I do see it, how it is being driven by social media. We live much more of an individualized life. Everyone is just staring at their screen, bubbled up individually. So it has to do as well with this. But I think we're missing out on this idea of activism at university, joining university groups, I mean, when I remember my university days as students, I have very fond memories of this.
They were very different.
Where if you have a free lesson, it was not a time to run away from here and go and work. It was a time when we just lay around in the sun and, talked. And some of those friendships are still remain after 20 years. So I think these are things these nitty-gritty experiences of actually experiencing university life, which I tell students, it's important to learn, it's important to earn your degrees here, but it's important to live the university life.
I'm probably one of the few living the university life, and I'm 51.
Yes.
I'm making the most of it, but I can tell you, most students in this university clock in, clock out. You've mentioned the organisations. Now you talk about silos. You can only join certain student organisations here if you were under that faculty. Now, that does not happen in Ireland. You can join,
Absolutely.
and Paul Redmond mentioned this when we interviewed him, that if you're a business student and you want to join the medical society, there might be a doctor there that needs a business guy. And that's part of networking. And Alex, we have talked about this before. Many times. They don't understand this idea of networking. Now, if you're in university and you're taught about the great life in university, if you're not even allowed to join the literary society because you're a doctor or whatever their various criteria are, how are you actually creating a network or learning to create a network? That student life is not
and I
in
teach
University
social
of Malta.
networking. I teach social networking, and I'm looking at it in front of my eyes, and it's collapsed.
It's really sad.
But I keep on pivoting it. I still think there is an opportunity for higher education institutions, if they want to remain relevant, and if they are not monopoly universities, they're going to have to do this. What this university will do, I really don't know. There are some brilliant minds in this organization, and some of my best conversations have been with AI professors and sociologists. But at the end of the conversation, we all go back to our rabbit holes.
Yes.
And we can't get out of them. I'm sitting here being texted by my head of department to go to a meeting where we have to look at examination marks. And we have to cross-check each other's examination marks. For the first time in 13 years, I was actually forced to set an exam for my students, because normally I give people project work. And for the first time I had to do it. And I really struggled with what to do. And at the end of the day, I said, I'll use technology to try and get these guys to do an exam. But I kept on doubting myself to what is it that they are learning by these guys having to go in and do an exam. So I repivoted everything into case studies. And try and get people to think. But as long as we remain rooted in learning outcomes, PISA results, policies which happen from even outside this organization, success which is deemed to be numbers and how many people end up wearing a funny hat, and then out into the labor market you go. And here, I repeat, we don't have the same problem as the Italys of this world. The old thing used to be, why are so many beautiful things in Italy, for instance, because you have so many unemployed architects, it used to be, no? So that's and by the way, I also saw this firsthand, okay? Little anecdote about AI. I was in Rome last December, and the discussion was about the impact of AI on society. There was the CEO of Pininfarina over there, and she was listening to a lot of stuff about AI. And she said, I had the squadron leader of the Frecce Tricolori turning up. And he turned up and told this lady, we have a new plane. It's short, fat, and squat. Make it look beautiful. And she said, am I going to turn to AI to make it look beautiful? Am I going to turn to my designers to make it look beautiful, or somewhere in between? And I think you're going to have to learn how to hybridize.
Somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between. And we're not teaching those people. We're not teaching people how to look in those gaps. Those gaps are the most interesting things.
But Alex, there's something interesting about all the metrics, right? So the university is also an organization. It also takes a lot of public money.
Sure.
So there are many reasons why metrics need to be tracked, because there needs to be some measure of something. Now, structures.
I'm saying they shouldn't.
No, yeah, I'm not saying you. I'm not
I
saying
used to be an accountant. I know about KPI.
The value of, but so this comes from sociology, right? So structures are important. They're necessary, but also it is values which breathe life into structures, rules. So, and this I think is circling around what university is for, and about students and university life. I think the structures and how we assess students should be about or aiming at a set of values. And I don't know if we're doing that. For example, I think the value of excellence of pursuing. I know there's a billboard outside as you're coming in, but I don't think we're really
Pursuing excellence.
properly, because excellence is inherently elitist in a way, and that is not in tune with the zeitgeist, right? We're now democratic. Everyone gets an award. That is not true, because once you enter the world of work, not everyone gets a reward. You need to show up. You need to do good work. So the other thing which was interesting in Paul Redmond's interview was fragility. Yeah. And I think Gen Z are fragile, and that makes them unemployable. And I will fire you. I won't actually hire you in the first place. Actually.
In what way do you mean that?
You need to tiptoe around giving people feedback, and I don't have time for that. I don't have time to mother you. I've got quarterly targets.
So their emotional resilience that we would have had,
resilience?
So they don't have emotional resilience.
I don't
so how do you teach that in university? I mean, that's what university isn't for that.
No, you're right, but that's a social problem, not a university problem. We are raising children. We have one child. Those of us who have children, and they are now little emperors or little empresses, like Chinese, raised by Nando probably. And now we've stopped. I think discipline is gone. Self-discipline, rather, to be exact. The value of duty, the value of doing something because you should do it, because to wait for the result. So now it is instant gratification. It's doom scrolling. It's living life in easy mode. And work is, ironically, world is getting much, much harder. So this is the irony, right? AI is fantastic at text. It is fantastic it's brilliant at text. Yet, humans, we are reverting, not even to text anymore. Now we're living on Instagram and TikTok, which is not even textual in the first place. Now, how can you think with images? You cannot. Concepts and problem solving can only be done in language. Now, by language, I mean either language or logic or maths. Mm-hmm. But we are now basically offloading things onto machines. And I have to ask, people will always have a job. Why? Because AI is good for automating tasks, not jobs. But when I interview someone, I stop looking at their university degree. That's basically like asking me to check if they have a heartbeat. Yes, that's literally just the reason.
What do you look for then?
I have a conversation with someone.
Okay.
Mm. So I look at their CV, I look at what they're doing, and then I talk to them and see how good they are with language, whether they've understood their concepts, whether you can apply them. Mm. So I take something from your own CV, let's say you've worked on a project, and then I present a counterfactual. I saying, if this had been this, how would you have dealt with?
Problem solving.
Yes, complex problem solving, being adaptable, but also being intellectually curious. So if you tell me, does it matter if someone if an engineer have a philosophy unit? I don't care. It's irrelevant to me. What matters is, are you good at your domain? Because domains are deep, right? There's a lot to learn. But also, can you not just
engage with what you've done?
I was going to say, there's levels to learning a piano. Let me use an analogy. There's just doing the basic steps, then you're playing a piano, and then you master an instrument. And I'm looking for mastery, where you are in the driving seat, where you drive AI, not AI gives you ask a prompt, you get the result, and then you copy and paste it to me. And I'll tell you why on this note. Even the advanced models like Fable 5, if you after the second turn, they will give you, I won't say hallucinations, but they won't give you a fair representation, because AI is not grounded. Okay. And this has an analogy with the humanities, by the way, something which the engineering sciences don't, because engineering and sciences deal with a material world, which is always grounded, can always revert back to it. But the social world is created, and AI is purely syntactic. So what I'm looking for is someone, whether it's a science or an engineering role or a non-engineering role, who can see output in front of them. And they don't accept it because it looks plausible.
Okay.
They go beyond the syntax and see what is actually grounding what is being given to them. Okay. And that's a very different kind of thinking, and I don't think you can teach it. I hope university can teach it, but it needs to be taught explicitly.
Okay. Now, we are just about 1 minute left, and I know both Alex and Valerie want to jump in desperately. So, Valerie, I'm going to go to you first, and then I'm going to go to you, Alex.
Yes, I think that makes much what Brian just said, makes it much harder for the younger generation than it is for you as mature students. Reason being is they are so immersed to this attention economy, so much immersed to this, if you want something, if you want any form of information, it's there at your fingertips, that it makes it harder for them to think, to acquire skills in terms of problem solving, which is a very important skill, I would say, today more than ever. So, and I go back to my original comment on critical thinking. This is what I was referring to, the very fact that you stop and analyze your own self reflexively, not just your own positionality in whatever you're studying, but also analyzing this process, which is, I think, a very essential part in being not just a citizen, but being a human being in your growing professional development, personal development as well. That I think that is where universities need to come in having these skills, these social skills, which are very much needed more than ever, I would say, today. It's not just the knowledge, because knowledge they're getting from their phones, whether it's true or not, whether that's another question. But these skills to solve problems, to analyze things around them, to discuss, to communicate what they actually believe, because even that is hard. What do you believe? What is your thought about that? I often ask these questions to students, and sometimes I see blank faces, because so this, I think, is the challenging aspect of a university today, to offer these questions, to teach and train in these teaching and these thinking skills rather than teaching skills.
The engagement skills. Alex?
Notes. One, this is a 3CL podcast, and most of you guys don't even know what we're doing. Okay, the 3CL, but critical thinking and connected learning is something that we believe in fundamentally. So AI, different generations, we still need to understand what's happening. We have an ongoing project at the moment going on. We're looking at 5 different generations in the workplace. People older than me, boomers like me, X, millennials, Gen Z. You have 3 Gen Zs behind you. And one of the reasons why I got them here, because after we've done this, I want these guys to do this. Because frankly, I'm, 65, you're in whatever it is, okay? 2, the Gen Zs are getting a lot of bad press at the moment. And I'm finding a lot of young people who are trying to muddle their way out of they have inherited something that Silicon Valley, my generation, gave them. Okay, the internet I fell in love with when I was in my 40s is not the same internet that they have now. Okay, they have been gamed, their attention has been gamed, and now if we're saying that you do not necessarily go to a university for knowledge, I repeat, we have to question how people are going to keep learning. I still think we're at a stage at the moment of understanding what's going on, because most of us are not understanding what's going on. Okay, whether it's the various Musk saying at the end of the day he is hiring people with history degrees, he says, and with social sciences. I don't believe a word of that. Okay, but we're in a very strange times. Okay, we're really in strange times right now. I will continue to believe deeply that at the moment, whilst I'm still doing my education lark, I'm still in a situation where I'm dealing with people who are facing me, and I'm teaching a digital literacy course, and it's too late. The damage has been done. And I spend most of my time, over 13, 14 lectures, trying to get their attention, using whatever trick on the book there is to at least get them to enjoy the space, the moment, the now. Not to look at a screen, not to think about a future. Now, what's happening now? Universities should be about the now. We should have to go back to debates. We need to go back to conversations. We can record, and it doesn't matter if then people come and record it. And, Godfrey Baldacchino is our chair, and Godfrey tells me that he enjoys taking people out in a field.
He does.
Which I don't.
He does. I've done all his lectures. He loves the field
but
trip.
I'm saying we need to do whatever it takes to, if those of us who are in the business of enjoying learning and lifelong learning, because if you stop learning for life, you might as well die. That's why I use the analogy of my late father-in-law, okay? We're at that stage. I think AI can help us get out of our comfort zone in the same way that, unfortunately, we are risking a generation alpha that will not be literate, will not know how to read, will not know how to write, will be using an interface somewhere. We haven't talked about any of that. So the future is either dystopian, or the future is going to be, and my hope is in the Gen Zs who vaguely just remember something of the old life. We remember life pre-internet, my generation, okay? And I think our business should be to empower these people now to do the right thing, okay? That's what we're trying to do. Anyway, Patricia.
Well, thank you all so much. I just know I want to bring back smoking jackets and pipes and everyone sitting around discussing Foucault and winding Brian up to no end. So we have a lot to do. It's a huge task. I think everyone would agree it's going to be a huge task. And maybe if we step outside of our mindsets and silos, we might actually achieve it. But certainly the humanities and social sciences are crucially important for that engagement. But we have run out of time, and I'd like to thank my guests for all their wonderful insights. Valerie, Brian, Alex, thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank our cameraman, Alex Gallia, who's here behind the scenes and will be doing all the lovely post-production, as well as FM 103.7 for hosting us today. So until next time, stay curious. Thank you.